Dear Walid, I'm happy to host you, and this time we're going to talk about pre-1948 Jaffa. What's your connection with Jaffa? Can you explain more about the family history of how it is both in Jaffa and Jerusalem? Please go ahead.
Okay, okay. Thank you for the Zoom. And I will start first. I did an exhibition with my cousin about Jaffa at Books and Cafe, Jacaranda. And at that exhibition, which was recorded by the Jordan television, we put letters from the past because we were residing in Jaffa in 1909. That year, of course, Tel Aviv was established. My grandfather, Haj Raghib al-Khalidi, the face, he's here, this is the picture. That one who was with the judiciary court at Jaffa. He bought a farm at Tel Rish. Of course, we are Jerusalemites, so he went to Jaffa for a reason, because at that time there was troubles in Jerusalem between the Ittihadis and because after the coup d'etat against Abdul Hamid, it got worse in Jerusalem. So he wanted to raise his family in a clean environment. He bought the farm and he worked with the court and his, of course, his sons, he educated him, and they fought for the Ottomans. They started, after the coming of the British, they started to work with the British. My grandfather went as prisoner after the Gaza war that took Bir al-Sabah. He was with Jamal Pasha, who tried to invade the Suez Canal. So he returned back and he worked with the Department of Health at the Malik George Street, King George. So he lived at Manshiyeh. His father was at Tel Rish, and all the family, Jaffa was a very, very pleasant city. It was like Beirut. It had a port. Trade was great. Everything was fantastic. But at the exhibition, we published these letters, very important, because it reflects living in Jaffa in the 20s, 30s, 40s, till the fall of Jaffa. And this is very important to register the falling within these letters that went to Beirut. At that time, it was still open because the British were trying to protect Jaffa not to fall before the end of the mandate. So we put it in the at the exhibition, and now we are trying to make other exhibitions in Jaffa and Algeria. That is a series of. The thing here, it's okay. We were family, but we are trying to focus about the city we love, because Jaffa is it's nostalgic. It's a place that you cannot forget. It's if you have been there, when I was young, we used to swim in the harbor. The history of Jaffa is also fascinating because it started, in the past, started with the Canaanites when they, with their Canaanite jars and at the Iron One with the torpedo jars also, goods were shipped from Jaffa port to Cyprus, to the whole area of the Mediterranean, and so there was something very important for a city established by the Phoenicians. And also that there was cooperation between the Canaanites, southern and the northern Canaanites, which are the Phoenicians. Then after, you know, the history of Jaffa, or before, maybe I should have mentioned it, Tuhutmos, the Battle of Megiddo, having the Egyptian, what was called the Egyptian hegemony at the time. Of course, they were cruel, the pharaohs, but they had something. They had culture, civilization. They had a fort at Jaffa, built by Ramses II, and with the cider roof and all these things. So it was important for the pharaohs, but it had important for the Phoenicians before the Greek. The importance of Jaffa also historically took place when King Richard defeated the Saladin army at Arsuf, and he made a treaty for the first time to let the pilgrimage coming from Europe through Jaffa to Jerusalem. So this was important that there was a treaty, there was diplomatic relations with the Crusaders, because there was a win-win situation after the Ramleh agreement with Saladin. They splitted Palestine. There was two pieces, and it was respected, of course, and by this great these two great kings, Saladin and Richard. They were noble kings. We call them noble kings, and. What the Crusaders made in Jaffa, they started like our friend Dino, producing sugar to Europe. It was a very important commodity. This, you know, the plains of Sharon and these in Palestine, the plains of the Galilee, it used to produce food vital for Europe through centuries. Let's say sesame was exported from Jaffa to France in the mid of the 19th century. Cotton during the American Civil War, it was because Britain had lack of cotton at that time. They even planted cotton by the councils, which were ambassadors to their states, like Khayyat. Someone was called Khayyat, Asad Khayyat, I think. He was the Council of Britain, and he was a farmer, Lebanese, and he promoted planting the American seed in Palestine because there was requirement for the cotton. So you have also plantation, and the farming around Jaffa was very important. It was prosperous, and it was the port of northern Palestine. This was before, Acre, of course, was important, was supervised export from the north, Jaffa in the middle, but sometimes you got goods from Damascus itself coming, or Dir'a, or to Jaffa and shipped by and Gaza, supervised Gaza area. So a plantation started to grow. The Palestinian farmers at the mid of the 19th century were very keen to develop the well-known Samuti oranges, which was brought originally by Marco Polo. It was sweet with thick flesh, and it could survive the rotten, which was caused by shipping oranges through the sea in a salty area, atmosphere, and so it also became prosperous. The Ottomans started after the Tanzimat of 1860 with the help of the councils and the foreign governments to realize that Jaffa Port Said and Beirut is very important for their domain, for their economy. So they started building in the 1860. They did the custom house in Jaffa before Beirut. The railway started at Port Said, but it was established by Abdul Hamid. Sultan Abdul Hamid. It was established at the Manshia quarter. Of course, it was a fantastic project at the time. It served the route to Jerusalem, and this is very important to get goods. Like if you go to Fas, you remember when they used to ship cider from Lebanon, from Tyre to Jaffa. It was called Jaffa. Jaffa, it's called Jaffa, the beauty. It
Yes.
is, by the way, it's Hellenistic. It's Hellenistic.
Of course.
So they boosted this route. It participated in the growing of West Jerusalem. And the one who did it was the grandfather of Ishaq Navon, who became later. And so there was also Jewish community living in Palestine, taking bids from the Sultan. And it was fantastic. There was no trouble with the Jewish community. Of course, Jaffa was having Jews in Jaffa was a little bit difficult because it was far from Jerusalem and they didn't have even cemetery. So they started organizing themselves. So we can say that there was Jewish from Jaffa, like the last, let's say, the last municipality had the municipality. His name municipality chairman Israel Rokach. Israel Rokach was he was born in Jaffa, not in Tel Aviv, but he became, after Dizencourt, he became the second. I need to say something I missed, that during the Napoleon campaign, he put Jaffa under siege and he did a massacre there, of course. It was a message to Jazzar Basha to make him get scared and quit Akka, but it didn't work. And of course, we see Napoleon in the Armenian monastery with, at the Louvre, with the famous picture at the Armenian convent, and you see the castle in the front with the French flag. This is the citadel of Jaffa. Citadel of Jaffa was built through time. The one who did the walls was Abu Muhammad Abu Nabut, who after Napoleon also started making new projects, good projects for Jaffa. Masjid al-Kabir, Sbil Abu Nabut, the fountain for people to drink at the Jerusalem Jaffa Road, and at Jaffa itself at the big mosque. So there started, people get more and more educated by time. Then in the 1860, the AUB start good education institutions. So the Palestinians started to get more, started to develop their city with these new ideas. And of course, there was newcomers coming, Jews from Algeria. Then they came the American. There was the American colony in Jaffa, then the German colony, the Templars, the same people who came from Haifa. They did at Sarona. They did a great job in giving industrial thoughts for the city, for the population. So there was cluster. It turned to cosmopolitan since that time. Till the of course we need to say that even during Jamal Pasha, who gave the famous road, which is now Jaffa Tel Aviv road, Jamal Pasha, of course, he was cruel. I know this, but during his time there was some projects that they did, the Ottoman, but it was too late anyway. So the British came. We came with them, our family, and it was honor for that. You know, at that time, Jaffa was very hospitable city. Everyone goes there. It was called Jaffa Al Gharib, the city of the strangers. If you go there, you take the Jaffa green card in less than 1 minute. You are welcome. So when we went there as family, we were let's say part of the family, part of the city. Very easy to make this. So this is our story with Jaffa. It started with 1909, and we lasted till the fall of Jaffa. And this is a brief of history. And
I have a question for you. I have a question for you.
Yes.
You mentioned Jews in Jaffa who lived in harmony with local Arabs. Are you referring to local Jews or European Jews who came in 19th century and early 20th century? Because there's a difference.
I'm referring to all.
You're talking about Mizrahi Jews.
Anybody coming, whether from Algeria, from other parts. Of course, the acceleration of Jews, non-Eastern Jews coming from North Africa or Iraq or such, or Egypt even. The problem started, of course, after the Balfour Declaration, after the coming of the British, because they were the catalyst of a new project, a project which was not executed in a scientific way. The Zionism, of course, it was one of my family, he was Yusuf Dia. He warned Herzl about coming to Palestine without declaring or clarifying what are the aims of their coming. There was even Sultan Abdul Hamid suspected that it is colonialism. They are not coming to reside for humanitarian reasons. By time, it showed. I'm not talking about clear cut. Churchill himself spoke at the Common, and he pinpointed that the problem started in Palestine after the Balfour Declaration and after the becoming of the mandate, especially when the Herbert Samuel was assigned, and he came from Jaffa port. He was a Zionist. So it's this is part of history. I'm not here to condemn or other. We need to talk about Jaffa city, about what happened in a good way. Of course, after the coming of the Jews and in big numbers, and there was a revolution in Jaffa in the early 20s. You remember this? There was another one in the 33 and 36.
36 was a big rebellion against European
for
settlers.
A reason.
Yeah. Go ahead.
For a reason, and there was, of course, some killing from both cadres. And that Ben Gurion was he was, let's say, he was part of. He witnessed the first one in Jaffa, the one in the beginning of the 20s, 1920, I think, or 21. There was a revolution in Jaffa because there was two communist sects or let's say parties within the Jewish. They quarreled, and then came Arabs, and something. And they attacked some of the Jews at the port because they had a hostel there. So it's known, and it's part of history. But Ben Gurion, what he did with Zalman Levantine, who was the manager of Bank Layomi, or what it was Anglo-Palestine, then it turned to Layomi. Bank al-Ummi, we say it in Arabic. They finance and also Meir Dizengoff, who was the first mayor of Tel Aviv. They started circling Jaffa from Petah Tikva, from Holon, from Nater, in a circle, putting in a circle. It was, let's say, nobody noticed, but through time there was a scheme. So it's not something that we cannot mention. We should mention it. That there were political aims for circling Jaffa. Humanitarian, of course, everybody has the right to come to Palestine, but the British mandate gave nationality for any Jews who come. But let's say after the end of the Ottoman rule, Palestinians in Argentina or other places were deprived from their nationality. So the British did a very nasty thing, that there was prejudice and there was too much acceleration in making a Jewish homeland on the expense of the Palestinians in a very rude way. So it wasn't, anyway. So living in Jaffa during the 20s, 30s, of course, it started to boom, population increased, and industries were covering, and the new bourgeois started to emerge in Jaffa. Because before this one family, let's say, we were part of the Qta or the extended families, or the old system. But in the 20s, 30s, no, you would notice somebody coming from poor families, families who had the skills or who made the fortune and started to rise. Masri, for instance, Masri at Nablus.
Yeah.
From their small, they started to have Farid Saad, Shomans. They started to grow in Jerusalem, and they were respected. There was no problem for the Palestinian society to have newcomers, to make new bourgeois. It enriched all Palestine because they were ambitious. Some, like it happened in Europe, some married from aristocracy, or it happens in any society. So at that time, the problem, we need to focus on something before I go to my family, that what is called the Palestinian leadership, whether it was opposition, it was based, of course, opposition was based at the coastal areas. Asad Shuqayri, Mustafa Al-Khairi in Ramle, Omar Bitar, Asim Said in Jaffa. These people were in the opposition most of the time with Raghib al-Nashashibi. Raghib al-Nashashibi was, of course, it's known that he was with good ties with Nur Said and Abdullah. These politicians and respected kings or politicians, they had consensus that we are fighting a lost cause. Palestine is doomed. They did not declare it, but they felt it. What happened with, and they were all respected as in their, let's say, tries, what different it was. Haj Amin was a populist, like, let's say, I want to say now, but we have populism. He was with the people. What happened here with Haj Amin, and the people are always right. At that time, you cannot have his strength was in the people. Sometimes you needed to lead the people, not to mislead. So, I mean, mistakes, one of his mistakes, after sometime he went to Egypt. He lived under, of course, after he was banned from entering Palestine because he dealt with Hitler, or he contacted Hitler, something like this. He was banned by the British to enter Palestine. So there was no leadership in Palestine. It was difficult for the parties to have the orders from Egypt. Then Jama al-Arabiya, the Arab League, started to interfere. And there was a vacuum that you didn't have leadership in Palestine. One. Two, the interference of the Arab League, where it should have been the Arab leaders. So there was a lack of political will by the Arab states, which was under the mandate itself. And they could not do something useful when it came to the war. So, I will reflect something other thing. At the letters, we reflect the good thing about Jaffa, about the living, about the culture. We had, of course, Jaffa, we had the broadcast. It was British, of course, British from the army, Izat Sharq al-Adna. So the one who did it who established this broadcast, Marsak, Hardwood Marsak. He was from the British army. And it was amazing that it gathered all we know the Egyptian singers, people coming from Lebanon, and the industry of in Egypt, Abdul Wahab, Jaffa, to broadcast what happens. Of course, the broadcast of Jerusalem also, which came also in 36, also added to this thing. People start coming to Jaffa because during the Second World War, there was camps, British camps, and suddenly after the end of the revolution, which was suppressed by Giles Bake. Giles Bake he was like Lab, or in Jordan. He was the British commissioner or other. He used very dirty tricks to control the revolution, and they even killed the leaders. So they ended the revolution, and the prosperous came to Jaffa after the Second World War. This includes the newspapers, and it's also, we have something to deal about the yellow newspapers that started to spread in Egypt and Palestine.
Yeah, you're talking tabloids. You're talking about tabloids.
Yes, we have. I have some. I can show it to you. The tabloids from Jaffa at that time. So I was mocking, and at that time, people were getting rich. Many came from Lebanon, like Emil Bustani. He came to Ajami to make some. They gained money. Lebanese. At that time, the currency of the Lebanese was low, and working in Palestine was a dream to any. Of course, in Jerusalem also, there was booming in the industry and all these things. So we lived happily in Jaffa. I see this in the photos. Such like this is my grandfather here, the great grandfather at the court. You see here the Jewish judge and the British judge.
Yeah.
He's here.
And
so
where's your grandfather? Listen,
yes,
where's your grandfather
this is the great...
on this photo? Can you point out your grandfather on this photo? Can you point your grandfather?
Yes. Haj Raghib al-Khalidi. Haj Raghib al-Khalidi was famous in Palestine as that one.
Yeah, Sheikh.
You see the ribbon.
Of course. He was a Qadi.
This is my grandfather here. Hassan Shukri Khalidi. Bake. He had the Bake. The title at that time, not like Egypt and Jordan. He was a doctor, but who gave them the title Bake or Pasha? Only Palestine, by the way, it had 3 pashas only. Yusuf Dia Pasha, Arif Baja Dajani, and Musa Kazim only, not like Egypt. Beik, it was common, and you have the Effendis. Effendis, somebody like me. Beik, it needs somebody who's experienced, somebody like a doctor or lawyer or famous or something like that. So they had ranks. The English, the British respected the old Ottomans, tradition, because this is very important, that the British tradition is similar to Palestine. They have these lords, so they felt at home in Palestine. طبعا Jaffa at that time is a very important Congress. The Library of the Congress made this photo for Jaffa in the 30s, 34, and it extends here. This is the citadel here, citadel, and it extends to Manshiyah. It's like Beirut. It is similar to Beirut for a reason, because establishment of Jaffa was done by the Phoenicians using the Egyptian cadet or the measure. And this is in archaeology very important, that the Phoenicians, when they built cities in Palestine or in Carthage or in Spain or whatever, they used the Egyptian measure because they invented the hadith. So there was harmony. The Canaanites were flexible with anybody who came to govern them or to control them. They did not fight. The Canaanites the Canaanite was famous as the middleman. Middleman means, what do you need? I will provide you. Don't go to politics here. This is his motto. So, and this is a recipe for success, because everybody needed to make career in Jaffa, whether he is Asad Khayyat, a council, or whether he's a farmer, and the nice thing about Jaffa, that plantation, the expertise of the Egyptian, they are skilled in farming. So they started what was called in Jaffa the Saknat. Saknat Darwish, Tal al-Rish, Saknat Tal al-Rish, yani the outskirts of Jaffa, the suburbs, and they established it as farms. There was of course other things that they also used to make. Let's say there was soap factories, Domiani, which was owned by a famous Christian family from Jaffa. The Domianis used to make soap. Of course, soap came to Jaffa through Nablus, and it was shipped to all over the world. It reached Cyprus at that time. And I'm happy to say also from Salt, because these people who, the sons of the owners of soap factories in Nablus, went to Salt and they boomed the industry there. And there was a very short road between Salt and Nablus, and they start shipping their things. The salty raisin was needed by the Ottoman army. Their soap in Salt went to Cyprus. This is Hada. There was a new spirit in Hada under the Ottoman because of the Tanzimat law. Because what happened here, the Ottomans realized that you cannot neglect Salt, which was the capital of Transjordan at that time. And we cannot neglect Jaffa, let's say, because it is needed. Their goods are needed. It is selling.
Of course. It was a trade center.
Trade center. What happened here, colonization around Jaffa started to grow. Jewish community refused to pay taxes for for quarters around Jaffa, Florentine, Shapira, Al-Kartoun. In 1947, Dr. Haikal, who was the last mayor, declared at the newspaper that there was something coming. They did not want to pay tax anymore. The partition scheme, of course, this inflamed the thing, because the only thing to deal with it from the Palestinian side, by opposition or by Hajj Amin people, of course, I should admit the coordination between the two. Of course, opposition was weakened after the revolution of 1936, but it stayed as stood. Haj Raghib was one of the opposition, and there is a picture of him. I hope it's here. Yes, it's here. This is his photo. Haj Raghib, who is our this is here, and you see Omar Bitar and Raghib al-Nashashibi, all these and these people were the elderly. They have rational thinking. They wanted to make negotiations, let's say, with Britain, but Britain did not want to make that negotiation. It was a matter of, there was bad intentions, of course, and this led by the end of the war to the fall of Jaffa. So what we have also to say about.
Listen, I'm going to send you another link, because this one is going to expire in 1 minute, and we can continue our conversation.
Okay.
I'll send you the link in 10 minutes. I'm going to send you the link. Yeah.
Okay.
See you soon.
You will close now?
Yeah, I'm closing now, and I'm going to send you the link.
Okay, I will bring Muhammad. Okay.
Now we came to a fateful 1948, the year which marked the establishment of the State of Israel, and Jaffa, because it was a coastal center, a harbor, was one of the main targets of Zionist troops and Zionist leadership. What can you say about 1948 or Nakba?
Nakba, precise about Jaffa. Jaffa was, there was a scheme first called Hamitas. This was Hamitas. It was the turning point in the war, because Jaffa was led to its destiny, as Ben Gurion say. It was suffocating because of the siege that went over. Ben Gurion had a plan. He made it in Tel Aviv to dismantle or to cut roads between Jaffa and villages and Jerusalem, let's say. And the first thing they did in Jaffa, Tal Latvinsky was a British camp, and there was weapons inside, a lot of weapons. So there was a transfer for these ammunition, and somebody talks about ammunition from Lydia area, but I think it's both. And this took a great part in the fall of Jaffa. Some of the arms went to the Irgun, to Begin, who was hidden at that time, because the Haganah took part in the, according to Hamitas, in occupying Haifa, Safad, then Jaffa. Haifa fell on the 20th, Safad on the 9th, I think, of April, it fell. Then it came to Haifa. Haifa, there was a general called Stockwell. He did something very bad, that he withdrawn from the harbor of Jaffa, and he let the Haganah control the city. And he was investigated in the Common in Britain. And this was a scandal at the time. That why did you quit طبعا he said I was threatened by the Israelis that you will be also targeted like the Arab population. So after the taking of Haifa, it started, the turn was on Jaffa to in only 3 days they moved to Jaffa. And what happened here, Jaffa was totally different from Haifa. It wasn't Jaffa was Arab city. With Ramle, there was a corridor to it, and it had supposed to be Arab still. It's not Tel Aviv, okay, for the Israelis by the partition, but Jaffa should have been kept for Arabs. I think Jaffa International or something like this. So there was because of what happened with Stockwell, who was promoted after by Montgomery to the NATO, I think, something like this, to hide his what he did. The situation was different because Flanagan, the one at Manshia, the British officer, I think he was centered at Sarona, the German. He was in a difficult situation. We cannot leave. We should protect Jaffa after the 3 days shelling from the 25th of April till that 3 days after this. The shelling was done by the Irgun, not by the Haganah. And this is very interesting that for the first time they made a parade in Tel Aviv. And Ben Gurion wanted to give the credit for the Irgun because he didn't want the Jewish army controlling Jaffa. Jaffa was occupied and destroyed house by house. It was they used the dynamite in removing all the Arab fortifications in the north. Gifati and Alexandroni brigades with Rabin and Alon, they concentrated on the lower part where Tel Rish is. Our farm was located at Tel Rish, Jabaliya, and Saknet Darwish. This is the northern. Of course, the Jaffa was protected by Jaysh al-Inqadh, the Salvation Army of Qawtji, and there were no Arab armies, and there was the fighters of Hajj Amin Husseini. And the problem there was something not good, that the relation between Al-Hajj Amin people, the officials, let's say, and Yusuf Haikal, who was the mayor, was not that good. And this has some reasons that Dr. Haikal, he was elected by Arabs. On the other hand, Sa'ir Rokah was not elected, but he was put in office by the British. So they made some strange thing, the British, that the mayor was elected, whether it is from the Jewish side or the Arab side, but he takes order from the British. So the communications were not by Ben Gurion or, let's say, Michel Isa, the military, or Adel Najmuddin, who was the military commander of Jaffa, by the Salvation Army. It went through Dr. Haikal, who was the civilian. And he had on his shoulder to facilitate with Israel Rokah what was called making Jaffa an open city. They tried to make it an open city. And in the first term, after the shelling, after the leaving of people through Jerusalem, Jaffa Road, and through the harbor, it was emptied from 90,000 to 5,000. This is horrific. This proves, like it happened in Jaffa, that there was forcing people to leave. It wasn't open city, as they say. The British were, let's say, more firm that they did in Jaffa, in Haifa, but they were not professional enough. In let's say it was doomed, the city. Okay, but they didn't do professional army work. Ergun at Manshia, they used bazooka against her. You should record this at the Manshia. They dismantled the Manshia police station, which was run by Flanagan, and the other, the district commissioner also. He took part in this. And King Abdullah tried his best, but he was, let's say, there was three Jordanian officials at the time, Tawfiq Abul Huda and Kirkbride and Glab. Of course, they were, let's say, taking orders from London. So this made it hard. King Abdullah was the higher commander at that time of the Arab armies, all Arab armies. So he was in a very bad situation, confronting London or his officials at the time. And this was one of the reasons why King Hussein, after, God bless his soul, he relieved Glab Pasha from him. It was one of these, and because Glab did not make good support for he tried to handle this. Of course, because we have courageous Jordanian leaders at that time, they could save some part of Palestine from falling. Jaffa was doomed, as we say, and this is the sad story of the war. Of course, my great grandfather Haj Raghib, he stayed at Tel Rish and refused to leave. He was at his 80s. This is bad that only 5% of the city, when it became miserable. The city was full of corpses. There was the only way, I think it was by the sea, or because they used to shoot people going. It was dangerous. You could use your life during the evacuation. So it wasn't clean. It was dirty war, of course. And what happened after that, the glory of Jaffa went forever. Till now, you don't see the glory of the city. And maybe Haifa regained some of its glory because there are other reasons for it. But Jaffa till now, it's not quite maintained as it was. It doesn't have a role. The commercial role, the cultural role, it all went. Have a question?
I have a question. What happened when your father came to visit Jaffa after the occupation?
Of course, we were not allowed to visit Jaffa till the 6-day wars of 67. And it was an opportunity for my mother, of course, we visited our relatives in Houris after leaving Jaffa. They went to Nablus, then to Jerusalem. We used to visit them under that time it was Jordan. It became Jordan. But for Jaffa, after the Sixth War, my father went there. It was very emotional for him to see that his house at Manshia destroyed. So he collapsed. It's emotional. Seeing and we also visited Jaffa after this. Stayed going to Jaffa all the time. I used to swim in the 70s. So we kept the record, we kept the tradition, we didn't cut from through the letters, through the big community of the Jaffa, and we also we married people from, we had marriages from people from Jaffa. So And till let's say 2 years ago, we went to Tel Rish. We took some pictures. I think I have one here. This is part of it. This is Tel Rish. See?
Yeah.
Now it is protected under, they don't use it. But what's fascinating about Tel Rish, it was Francois Joseph himself, the emperor, when he went to Qanat Suez, the Suez Canal, celebrations. He slept one night at our farm, and so it was a medieval, old house that we, of course, bought after. This is the Tel Rish. This is the well-known picture of the family at Tel Rish. This was 1928, 29. You see here, this is Dr. Hussein Khalidi, who was the secretary of the Palestinian Leadership, AHC school. Of course, he made many books about his experience in the war, and this is Haj Raghib sitting as an Arab Muslim, you see, family on the bench, and this is his wife, and this is my grandfather. This is up. You have Ahmed Sameh, who was the principal of the famous Arab college in Jerusalem. So this pictures is the only trace for us now after leaving the Jaffa. And we have it at every house. We stick to it. We like to see it all the time. We publish it from time to time, and we used it at the exhibition. Of course, the farm used to produce oranges, and we were lucky at the time. There was a story that, and it is in the letters, that Zuhdi Abu Jubain, who we married from his, Zuhdi Abu Jubain was the agent of Goodwin and Simon, which used to ship the oranges to London. And our farm was not more than 20 dunums or something. It was small, but what's unique in Jaffa, that, okay, you have 20 dunums or 30 dunums or what, if it was maintained by the ICI company, which is Maqdadi now, and if you supervise it by Zuhdi or the other big names, he will take your product, because it adds to the big product of the plantation around Jaffa, which is in million tons. So we were lucky at this. And now I have a lemon tree in my house. When I see it, I remember. You cannot forget when you go down to Jaffa. You cannot. It's a piece of heaven. You cannot think or feel that we lost it, but and we might regain it at the time. But we need to maintain the tradition. We need to, tell the story of Jaffa to the others, especially in English, because most our writings, it needs to be recorded. And I think it is very important, if we continue our exhibitions. Now we are heading to Jaffa, and this will take a big budget, telling the story of the fall of Jaffa, because it's very dramatic. Shelling people with the for this, and before the diaspora, very rare pictures, very few pictures that reflect and show you the bombing of Jaffa, also Jerusalem. There are some to see how in the night to see how much, how it was around 20 rounds per hour, I think, or something like this. So there was a very big number of big rockets that went into the center of Jaffa from all sides. So it was targeted in a very professional way. So that's it. Now we always, as I said, we are trying to go there, but they are not giving us permit to go. It's very difficult to go. The circle is tightening, not like Israelis when they come, they immediately
don't have a
give
problem.
them
They don't have a problem
don't
to
have a
get
problem,
Jordanian visas. But I have another question for you.
And 6
Maybe
months
it would
I
be.
spent trying to have visa. I did not have it.
I have
This is
another
bad.
question for you. What's going on
Okay.
with the Haredi library in Jerusalem that your ancestors founded?
Yes. My grandfather, Haj Raghib, the one who is in the photo I show you, he established of course, he had a long career with the Ottomans in the education departments, and even with he declared, for instance, the fall of Sultan Abdul Hamid, because nobody could do it. This was a shocking thing for the governor of the Ottoman governor at the time. They were still there, so he declared it. Haj Raghib he established the library. He taught his children, and he achieved a lot. And he was always the sound of reason in Palestine. He was respected, and many times he was nominated for the Majlis Islam al-A'la, but he, let's say, he had more experience than being locked in a position. So he was a friend to Isa family at the newspapers, at the Palestine newspaper, and he used also to tell Isa not to amplify Haj Amin Husseini, not to call him Samahati Mufti, because he didn't want something fully clergy, and he didn't had the title, but he used it to amplify his. This was bad, as it is done now in any. So they needed moderation. They needed more tolerance between. But always, even the British took part in this, inflaming the others against, using this divide and rule policy. They use it a lot in decrees, in not letting Arabs do this and this, while the other side had whatever they like. So, of course, if I were the other part, I would take advantage of this, this bias policy. And this is what happened. So Haj Raghib established the library family, library, the Khalid library, sorry. And he got the manuscripts from all Arab world, from Andalusia, through one of who helped them, Rawhid, Yusuf Dia, Khalil Khaldi. He was competing with Haj Amin, but he didn't win because it's known that Haj Amin was nominated by the British. The British always interfered, like they did with Israel Raqaq, they did with Haj Amin. They selected their candidate to make sometimes differences, to deepen the differences between the families. And it happened. It made it. Or nominating Raghib Nashashibi against Musa Kazim. They took the municipality from him. Of course, Musa Kazim he was a leader, was like Saad Basha Zaghloul, not the same rank, but he was respected in Palestine. So interfering with local policies was mean, and it was intended the British policy that was executed against the Arab of Palestine. The library now, we spent a lot of years. It was the help is very little for Jerusalem, and you need decades of. It was neglected for decades. The Arab and the Khalidi library, and there was some harm to that, to its manuscripts, and because there was neglecting Jerusalem, neglecting Jaffa, neglecting everything because of the occupation. But Dr. Wade Khaldi, he did a great effort with the Farford Foundation and others, and he took donations from Shuman, from others, and he saved all the documents. Now it's published. It's attainable to any, as it was in its glory day during the beginning of the 19th. It is a symbol in Jerusalem. We don't have and there is an Israeli policy not to allow re-establishing, or like the Arab College in Jerusalem, they took it from the no man's land area, and we made the efforts, and we took decisions from President Arafat at the time, and it will go to the negotiations, final negotiations, but they don't allow us to do things before that. This is bad. All the institutions are threatened, neglected. They fight مؤسسة التعاون. It is not a secret. And in Jaffa, I think it's worse than this. There are population is poor. They distribute drugs, and it's not a pleasant scene. You go to Ajami, okay, you have a nice time eating fish at Abu al-Afiyah or near the masjid, the small mosque.
Yeah.
But you feel there is something that, okay, we divide you. It was Jaffa, it was the city of modernity. And when Dizengoff, Levantine, and Ben Gurion, they were the catalyst for Tel Aviv, but even when Ben Gurion, when he this is very interesting story, that when then they invaded, they called conquering Jaffa. After they did so, Israel Rokah, he refused that Jaffa should not be named as Jaffa. And this is what they did first. And it was neglected for at least 5 years, putting people, they were in ghettos. Dr. Hassan Faraon, friend of us, spent 7 years with the Red Cross because he was the only physician at that time, maybe 2 or 3. Most of them were foreigners, trying to serve what was left of these people in captivity in the Ajami ghetto. So it was miserable till somebody interfered that this is not human, it's not, and it started to move little by little. But it was targeted till now, and and by this, I think it's Jaffa narrative. But if you have questions,
no, I don't have any question now.
If you have thoughts,
yeah, I think we can close for today, and maybe in coming weeks or coming months, we'll continue talking about.
You like to add?
Sorry.
You like to add things?
Yeah, maybe in the future, but for now it's enough. We can close here.
Yes, I think so. That's enough. Because we filled many.
Yeah. Thank you for your time.
And for your time, Saab, you are always welcome to help.
Of course.
I appreciate your help always.
Thank you so much. We'll see each other very soon. Bye-bye.
Yes. Thank you.